if you are experiencing things that are not normally like you, like if your appetite is different, if your mood is different, if you're having these thoughts and feelings that you don't normally have, to know that it's not just because there's this virus going around, but it's because it's impacting your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. Today you're going to meet Melissa Dumaz. I loved her advice in this episode. She is a wife, a mom, a licensed therapist, the best-selling author of the Love Challenge book, the co-host of the Hats podcast, and the founder of You Help You with counseling services for trauma, grief, loss for couples, and all stages of motherhood. She has so much good advice in this conversation. She is talking about what she likes to call quarantine fatigue, and we are all feeling this. How many people want to be done with the pandemic? That's everybody. So in this conversation, you are going to hear how what we're going through is traumatic, how we are dealing with a trauma right now, why that's important to understand, how to deal with these feelings of exhaustion and fatigue, and how the pandemic may be impacting relationships, and how you can take the first step in working on some of the issues that may be arising. So many good pieces of advice here, so let's get to it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with just how worn out people are feeling. I think even just not many days ago, I was walking in a grocery store with my mask on, thinking about my antibacterial soap, thinking, I'm just over this. I'm just ready for this to be done. So tell me a little bit about this pandemic fatigue. We're done. We're just kind of over it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people are feeling it. And I'm calling it quarantine fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are feeling exhausted, feeling like we're over it. And, initially, there was a lot of fear, which, still exists, and these concerns about, us being in a pandemic, which we're still in. And I think that, it has changed and impacted all of our lives in so many ways, from the way that we work, the way that we go to school, the way that we interact or don't interact with other people or friends and family, and just so many different ways of doing life. And I think a lot of us, were encouraged to be in the mode of being in quarantine because we knew that it would keep us safe and it would keep other people safe. And then we also, I think, saw it as temporary. Like, this is what we have to do for a short period of time to crunch things so that the numbers look different and so that we're all safe and healthy. And now here we are. How many months later? I don't know. I've lost count, on how many days we've been in quarantine. And so many of us are just feeling exhausted and feeling like we just want it to be over. And I don't think any of us are accepting it as the new way of life because we're just not ready to accept that yet.
Yeah, exactly. So where do we go from here? This is where you come in. What can we do to kind of lessen that impact of exhaustion in our daily life?
Right. I think one thing that we must all understand is, when we hear communities and social media outlets and news sources and different communities, make this statement that we're all in this together. I think that looking at it from a therapist is not just like, hey, we're all in this together to be able to work together and follow the guidelines in order to keep each other safe and healthy, but we're all in this together, meaning that we're in this traumatic experience together. Like, what we are experiencing is a worldwide or a nationwide trauma experience. And so because, we're in this traumatic, event, we're all being impacted by it differently. And as we're being impacted by it differently, that's something for us to keep in mind. One of the things that's important to keep in mind is that although it's important for us to stay on top of the latest news and to stay up to date about what the CDC says or about what your local government officials are saying about being at home or not being at home or what's considered essential, what's not, we also have to monitor how often we are allowing that information to to impact us, and how often we're allowing ourselves to listen to it and to see it. Just like any other news source, pandemic or not, I would recommend that you monitor how much news you're watching. The news can be a loop. So if we're on it all day long and listening to different news sources or different news anchors or reading different outlets just all day long, it can become at some parts unhealthy for us. Unhealthy for us. So it's important for us to monitor that. I think that that's one of the very first places to start, is to give yourself permission to check the news at whatever given time of day that works for you, whether that's morning, midday, or evening, and to give yourself a certain amount of time. Okay, I'm going to read this news article and then I'm going to log off, and I won't check the news again until the next day. Because things are ever changing, honestly, I feel like you're not going to miss anything. If you do miss something, it may get changed in the next 30 minutes anyway. So why not just wait instead of trying to learn what the news is every hour or every couple of hours?
I love that you talked about the shift. Even if you're just looking at the CDC, the information is shifting so often. Dealing with those changes, what is that doing to our well-being? 1 minute it's good to do this, 1 minute it's bad to do this, the next it's good to do this and bad to do this. What is that doing? Just riding that change, that wave, what does that do to our well-being?
Right. It's a roller coaster wave. It's a roller coaster ride that is up and down. And, one thing that we know about roller coaster rides, is that there's two groups. There's groups of people who like them and groups of people who don't. Like, there is no in between. Either you're getting on the roller coaster or you're sitting on the sideline and saying, you guys go for it. And when it comes to a roller coaster ride, though, some people, it's exciting, like, okay, I learned the newest. Okay, nope, that's not the newest. And for some people, it's anxiety provoking. It gives us butterflies in our stomach. It makes things uneasy. It makes doing life uneasy because we never know what's going to happen or what's going to come next. And we can talk about, let's be flexible and know that things are ever changing. But flexibility and change does not come easy to a lot of people. And if you know that that is who you are, that you don't do well with change, then it may be in your best interest not to sit and make yourself amenable or open to hearing about all these changes all day long. To, again, going back to schedule a certain day or time where you open yourself up to that change or that possible change.
And when it comes to the news, we're not only getting news these days, we're also getting everyone's opinion on the news. And yes, I don't think that helps us either.
So true. Absolutely.
You mentioned that this is a traumatic experience that we are dealing with. This is a sort of a trauma. How does understanding that and accepting that, yeah, we are going through something traumatic, how does that impact us? How can that help us to understand that?
I think that it will give you a better understanding to be gentle with yourself and to be gentle with other people. It will also give you a better understanding that if you are experiencing things that are not normally like you, like if your appetite is different, if your mood is different, if you're having these thoughts and feelings that you don't normally have, to know that it's not just because there's this virus going around, but it's because it's impacting your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. And even though you may not have it or you may not know someone that does, when we look at the numbers, so many people do, and that can be scary. And so knowing that, that is what's happening in the world, know that you are going to be impacted also, even if you're not literally impacted, you're impacted by it mentally and emotionally.
If someone is feeling some of this that we've talked about, this fatigue, are there any immediate actions they can take? You talked about monitoring your news consumption. What else can someone do, an immediate action that can start helping them feel a little better?
I think one of the most important things, in addition to monitoring your news, is also identifying a schedule for yourself. And sometimes that can be hard because if you are not an essential worker and you're home all day long, then the idea of a schedule is like, what? Like, I'm home, I'm not going anywhere. Why do I need a schedule? One benefit about having a schedule is that it helps to create or maintain some level of normalcy for you. And I feel that since we're living in such unnormal times, anything that we can have control over, since we don't have control over the CDC, we don't have, there's only so much control that we have over politics outside of voting when the time comes. But, there's so much, information that we're being provided that we don't have control over. Any little thing that you can control, whether it's your schedule, your diet, your workout, your exercise, anything like that, I highly recommend that you take control over the things that you can and find ways to be able to release the things that we cannot control. Because staying stuck in that thing that you cannot control can only lend to more, mental and emotional difficulties for you.
I think that's just overall a human issue, is wanting to control things that we cannot control. You said find a way to release the things you can't control. What are some tricks or tips that you give people to release the things they can't control? It's easier said than done.
Yes, it is easier said than done. And I will tell you this up front, Danielle, that it honestly, it's trial and error. It's, part of it is knowing yourself and knowing what works and what doesn't work for you. And part of it is also stepping outside of your comfort zone so that you give yourself permission to learn something new. I am a huge fan of journaling, of writing. I'm a huge fan of brain dumping. I feel like, we are bombarded with so much information throughout our days. We must take an opportunity to be able to literally open that brain up like it's a trash can and to dump it out. And we can dump it out by talking to someone, talking to a therapist or a friend or a family member. We can also dump it out by journaling. And the journaling, it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to win a Nobel Peace Prize. It doesn't have to be a best-selling paragraph. It's just literally being able to get out all those thoughts and feelings that are stuck within us and put them on paper. For some people, it's helpful to write them down and close the book and be done. For some people, it's helpful to write them down and literally crumble it up or shred it and put it into the trash can.
One of the things that I wanted to get to with you, because you are a marriage and family therapist, is how this is impacting relationships. And as you talked about the brain dump, I was thinking, for me, I'm at home all day with my kids all day, and I'm getting information all day, and I'm not going to brain dump on my kids, but when my husband gets home, we get the kids to bed, I just brain dump on him. And that's not something that's great for him because he's already dealing with all of his stuff. So I love the suggestion of writing in the journal, and I'm going to do that with the brain dump instead of put it on him. But how are these kinds of things, or really just this quarantine fatigue, impacting relationships?
So what's happening, or what I've been seeing, is that, a lot of people are at home all day long together, which for them hasn't always been the case, either because they normally work out of the home or because if they have children, their children are out of the home. But now they are working from home, homeschooling from home, doing everything from home, and possibly only going out of the house for essential needs. And so that may not be daily. So we're not getting that downtime that we used to get, whether it's from a commute, being able to commute in the car alone to and from the office or to and from school. We're not getting that quiet time either at home alone or in our car alone. So there's so many of our needs that were being met before that maybe we didn't even realize that we weren't getting before. And even in some of the cases of someone working out, now they're not able to go to the gym. Now they're working out from home. So many things that we may have outlined in our lives as a ritual that we didn't realize was a ritual and was feeding, our mind, body, and spirit. And now it's not. And so it's only natural that now you're feeling cooped up, and then your spouse is feeling cooped up, and then now you're taking that energy and being cooped up together. So that is definitely happening. And one of the most important things that we can do is acknowledge it within ourselves. Like, okay, I'm feeling a little irritated and upset every time my spouse says something. I realize it's not about them. It's about me, that I haven't had a chance to spend some time by myself, or I haven't had a chance to work out today like I normally would, or I haven't had any quiet time because the kids are home with me all day and I thrive off of quiet time, whatever that thing is for you, and identifying that and then being open and talking to your spouse about that. This could be an opportunity in your relationship where you're renegotiating about how you run your household, renegotiating about what you do as one individual in the relationship and then what the other person does. And that may need to change. It could be a conversation like, hey, babe, I really, really need 15 minutes of quiet time. I know that's a lot to ask, but is there a way that we can work that into our schedule? Or is there a way that we can swap so that you get that also, because I am suffering without it? And just being open and honest and transparent about what your needs are, because they may look very different today than they did 3, 4, 5 months ago.
I love that. That is such good advice. I recently, after finding out that we were going to be homeschooling our kids again for the at least the first 6 weeks, I noticed that so many of my friends, and I was feeling the same way, just like this overwhelm of like, oh my gosh, like I can't breathe in this house anymore. And I started just taking a 15-minute walk at the end of the day. It was just that I needed the space. It wasn't that I didn't love them. It wasn't even that I didn't want to homeschool them. It's just that I needed the silence. So I love that advice. Have you seen at all if couples are having issue with how big of a deal they think this is? So many people think that COVID-19 is either a big deal or not a big deal. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Have you seen, are couples fighting about just what they think their family or the two of them should be able to do outside the home and not outside the home? Have you noticed that at all?
I have not seen it specifically in my personal life with friends or family or in my professional life, but I can definitely see how it can impact a relationship. I think that it's a big deal. And in most cases, not all, but in most cases, when someone is in a relationship with another person, most times they have a very similar value system or very similar core value system. And so this is an opportunity where, hey, we're now, again, reevaluating what our system is or what our beliefs are for this thing. And again, if we don't agree, then we should possibly talk about why we don't agree or what our concerns are. Like, let's use, for example, you made mention that schools in your area may be opening in 6 weeks. And let's say one of you or your husband believes that, hey, we should still keep the kids home just to be safe. And the other is like, no, like 6 weeks, if the government officials say school is safe to open, then I want to send the kids to school. That can be a very different belief, between the two of you. And so the best way to be able to manage that is, again, having that open communication and being open to sharing what your fears and what your concerns are. It may be a fear or concern that the other one can help to manage, or it may, in some cases, may be an unhelpful thought, or it may be a thought that's not true. But by sharing it and talking openly about it with the other person, that helps you to be able to disseminate what it is exactly and what the roots are and how we can get to an understanding. And maybe it could be a compromise. I am a huge fan of compromising in a relationship because you come from a different space, he comes from a different space. We bring both of those things together. And if we can't agree, then we get to a place that hopefully we can meet in the middle and agree. And for the example of school, maybe that would look like we do a hybrid version of it. They go just a couple days or they go just a couple hours and then they stay home. If we can't agree that they go full time or stay home full time, can we meet in the middle on that?
I love that idea of coming to the middle. And it's funny, no matter how long you've been together, this is the school thing's not an issue my husband and I are having, but no matter how long someone's been together, 10 years for me and actually I've known him since I was 15. So, it's decades at this point. But still, this is not something we've dealt with before. So there are new conversations we have to have. Yeah. We've never had to parent through something like this.
Exactly. When you first said your I do's, you were not under the impression that you would be parenting during a pandemic. I don't think any of us were. We are now living in times that our children will be reading about, in history books, and our grandchildren, will be reading about in history books. And so, yes, because this is unknown territory, new territory for all of us, and especially two people in a relationship, you absolutely want to be able to talk about it together, and so that you can make decisions with it together, just the same as you would address any new thing that's happening in your relationship. If you're addressing, are we going to get a new car next year? Where are we going to go on vacation? How much money are we going to spend on the holidays, or whatever those things are that you and your partner discuss? This is similar situation, unknown territory. So we're going to talk about it together. And I think that if more than anything, what this pandemic is exposing in relationships are those that don't have that open communication, or those that did not have that foundation to be able to talk openly with one another. So even though someone may be coming to therapy, because their relationship is not doing well now, all this time has done is has exposed some of the things that maybe their relationship was missing in the first place. And now this is an opportunity to really address it.
That can be scary.
Yes, it can be very scary.
It's scary in regular times. Like it's scary to have these hard conversations with your partner when things are normal. But now you're always together. You're not getting an 8-hour break from one another, and you're at home while trying to solve your communication issues. So someone who's listening, if they're thinking like, okay, I got to have some hard conversations. Like I know that I need to take the first step. How would you suggest they take that first step to open up the doors of communication?
I'm a huge fan of I statements. And if anyone out there is listening to this that already knows me, that follows me, or has heard me on other podcast features, I am a huge fan of I statements. I feel that I statements are one of the very basic tools that we can learn in communicating our thoughts and our feelings. And so starting there, starting with how you're feeling, taking ownership over that, starting with where your thoughts are, rather than coming in and saying, you've made me feel, or this situation has made me feel, starting with, this is how I feel, or this is what I'm thinking, or I feel that helps to be able to soften our hearts and ears. And then hopefully it helps to be able to soften the heart and the ears of the person that you're speaking with, so that they're not feeling attacked or they're not feeling blamed, but we're taking full responsibility for what our thoughts and our feelings are. I think that would be the first place to start if you're going to have this hard conversation.
You know what? That's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you earlier in this conversation is, before you're even talking about having a conversation with another person, why is it important to really take a moment and realize how you feel? You had posted, how do you feel in this quarantine? Right, say, I feel whatever. Yeah. Why is it important just as an individual? Not even talking about I'm going to go have a hard conversation, but why is it important that I know how I am doing right now?
We have to name it. We have to be able to name it. When we're able to name it, then we can manage it more. When we're able to name it, we can tame it. Name it to tame it. Just the same as when you meet a new person, if you may have some anxiety about, like, who is this person or what's their name? Whenever you learn their name or you get an introduction, it helps to be able to manage possibly some of that anxiety or some of that uncertainty about who this new person is. Same thing with feelings. You know, sometimes they can feel uncertain, sometimes they can feel scary, but if I can name them and call them for what they are, then that helps to make them a little bit more familiar and a little bit more manageable.
So that's the first step, just as an individual, to figure out how you're feeling in this. Do you ever see people who are like, I don't even know how I feel, especially during something like this? How do you guide them through that?
When someone does not know how they feel, I ask them, where do they feel it? So asking yourself, okay, I have no idea how I feel. Okay, where do I feel this? Oh, I don't know. My head's kind of cloudy. I got butterflies in my stomach. My palms are sweaty. My mouth is dry. Okay, if your hands could talk, what would they say? If your dry mouth could talk, what would it say? And so maybe even starting there. You know, some people are not in tune with their feelings, and that's okay. And part of my work with clients is to help them to become in tune with their feelings. And sometimes that starts with helping them to become in tune with their body.
If someone is the other person in this conversation we've been talking about, and so we have an individual, so you're person A, and then person B comes up and says, I feel this way about the pandemic and quarantine and my fatigue. What is the most helpful thing that person A can do in response?
When someone says, I feel, I think one of the first things they can do is to let them know that they've heard them. Yeah. I hear you, or this is what I heard, or I understand, or if I don't understand, maybe asking a question. I would encourage person B to stay away from why. Because a lot of times when we ask the question why, it takes us to a place that I call the neck up. Neck up meaning now I'm thinking. And instead of addressing what's in my heart, my feelings, now I'm thinking. And sometimes when we're thinking, we're overthinking and we're thinking too hard. So to keep me in my place of my feelings, of what's happening in my heart, maybe asking me, tell me more about that. Or, oh, yeah, I feel that way too. Or, oh, tell me what else is, making you feel that way. But I would definitely discourage asking why.
When I'm thinking about quarantine fatigue, I'm thinking about, I'm not the only one in my family feeling this. I've got a 5-year-old feeling it, and a 7-year-old feeling it, and a husband feeling it. I want to ask, how can I support them? Because I think that's important. But I also don't, when I ask that question, I don't want people to think that it's all about all the other people and not themselves. How can we support the whole, my whole self and my whole family?
The first thing we can do is validate. If your 5-year-old, your husband or yourself comes and says, I'm exhausted, like, I'm over it, mom, or I'm over it, babe, or yourself says, you know what, Danielle, I am done. You say, and you are allowed to be. That is okay. I understand. I feel the same way. I get it. Like just validating, because the truth is we are done. You know?
We are
And
done.
so we are
Yeah.
done. And so since this is such unfamiliar territory, as we talked about before, when we share our feelings or our thoughts with somebody else, to know that we are not weird or wrong or bad for feeling this way, that we are allowed to. So giving your family permission to feel that way and giving yourself permission to feel that way, and just validating those thoughts and feelings, and to know that they are normal. There's nothing wrong with them.
One of the things I was thinking too is feeling like they're not alone. We're together in this, especially as a family unit. If we're together as a world, we can especially be together as a family unit.
Right, absolutely.
My 5-year-old had asked me a few days ago, Mom, is this the last day of the pandemic? And I was like, oh man, I wish. I really, really wish.
I know. My children have made statements like, when the pandemic is over, or they said, when coronavirus is over, can our friends come over? And I'm like, absolutely. I don't know when that will be, but they can absolutely come over.
Yeah. You'll all be a year older, but
right.
One of
Hopefully
the things,
that's it.
I know, especially in the beginning, we really had a positive attitude, and we were like, we're positive. This is how it is. And you mentioned that. That's kind of how we all felt. We're all in this for the good of one another. We're going to stay home and then we'll get back to work when we can. But as time's gone on, we can kind of weave in and out of that. And sometimes we are positive, but other times we're like, oh, I'm not feeling it today. How can I create that atmosphere of it's okay to not feel it today?
Right. Again, I think it goes back to giving ourselves permission, and finding things that make us smile, finding things that bring us joy, finding some level of normalcy throughout it all. One thing that we've done with my own family is that we focus on we're together. We've also focused on things that we can keep the same. So we're keeping bedtime routines the same. Even though they're not getting up for school, we're keeping bedtime routine the same. When they do get up, we keep that routine the same. We're still brushing teeth, washing your face, getting dressed for the day. So finding little things that you can still find joy in, and doing things that are fun. I do not consider myself to be a Pinterest mom, but I do, like to go there for good ideas. So also finding little, special things that you can do in your relationship or for yourself to make this time memorable in ways that don't feel like memories you want to forget.
I have one more question. It's the one question I ask everybody. It is, how do you find joy in the everyday, in the good, the bad, and the in-between? What is your number one tip to do that?
My number one tip for me is the beach. I'm not always able, I live in an area where I'm not far from the beach. So I can't see it from where I live, but it's an easy drive. And I live in an area where I do get that beach breeze. And so that to me is enough. And if my schedule does not allow me a day where I can actually get there, then it could be pictures, it could be closing my eyes and visualizing myself there, even to the point when I visualize it, I can smell the salty air, feel the breeze on my skin. So finding joy in my mind, finding joy in the memories and the things that have made me smile. And then sometimes it's in the everyday by hearing my children laugh, seeing my husband smile, connecting with friends, comedy, watching a comedy. I love watching comedies, something that can make me laugh. And colors, I love colors that bring me joy as well. So those are ways that I find joy in the everyday, no matter what the day looks like.
When you were talking about the beach, I was thinking when all of this first began, I was so anxious. I think a lot of people were anxious. Like, what does this mean? What's going to happen next? Are my kids going to be healthy? And I walked outside. I turned off Facebook and Instagram and all the things, and I went outside. And the wind was blowing and the leaves were like blowing around in the wind. And I heard some birds, and I was like, it's okay out here. Like, it's okay out here. Right, and so that's what I was thinking about when you said the beach. I think just outside sometimes can just feed our souls in a way that we can't get, especially not online.
Right. Absolutely. That breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Danielle. This has been amazing.
I hope you loved this episode. I really loved talking to Melissa. You can find all of her information, how to follow her, where you can find her podcast, where you can find her book. All of it is going to be in show notes. Thanks for being here on Happiness in Progress.